August 1963, Highway 61, somewhere in Mississippi where the heat makes the asphalt shimmer like water and the air tastes like dust and gasoline. A faded green Chevrolet pulled off the road in front of May's diner, engine ticking as it cooled. Bob Dylan, 22 years old with wild dark hair and a road-worn denim jacket, stepped out first. His boots hit the gravel with a crunch that seemed too loud in the afternoon silence. From the passenger side emerged James Carter, his guitarist, a black man in his late 20s carrying a battered guitar case. They'd been driving for 6 hours straight. The last town had a gas station, but no food. The town before that had food, but wouldn't serve James. Now they were hungry, tired, and past caring about what came next. The diner sat alone on the highway, white paint peeling, chrome trim catching the sun. And there, taped to the inside of the glass door, a hand-lettered sign, "Whites Only." Dylan saw it. James saw it. They looked at each other for a long moment. "We can keep driving," James said quietly. Not afraid, just practical. Dylan stared at the door. "You hungry?" "Starving." "Then we're going in." James shifted the guitar case. "Bob, this isn't New York. This is Mississippi. I know where we are." "Then you know what happens." Dylan was already walking toward the door. "Yeah, we get lunch." The bell above the door rang when Dylan pushed it open. Inside, the diner smelled like coffee and frying bacon, and something else. Fear, maybe, or just the particular sourness of a place where hate had soaked into the walls. 6 people sat at the counter and in the booths, all white, all local. A waitress in a stained apron stood behind the counter, pot of coffee frozen mid-pour. Conversation stopped like someone had cut a wire. Dylan walked to the counter, James beside him. Their footsteps on the linoleum floor were the only sound except for the buzz of flies against the window and the hiss of the grill. The waitress, her name tag said Ruth, slowly set down the coffee pot. Her hand was shaking. "We're closed," she said. Her voice cracked on the second word. Dylan looked around at the 6 people eating. "Doesn't look closed. We're full up. No more room." The diner had 8 empty stools and 4 empty booths. Dylan sat down at the counter. James hesitated, then sat beside him. A man in a John Deere cap 3 stools down stood up slowly. "Boy, you can't read?" Dylan looked at him. "I can read fine." "Then you saw the sign." "I saw it." "Then you need to get your friend out of here before there's trouble." "He's not my friend," Dylan said quietly. "He's my guitarist, and we're not leaving until we eat." The man's face went red. The waitress backed away, and somewhere in the kitchen a door slammed. The kitchen door swung open and a man emerged. Big, not fat, but big in the way that comes from decades of physical work. Gray hair, forearms like fence posts, an apron splattered with grease. This was May's husband, though everyone just called him Boss. He walked to the counter and stood in front of Dylan and James. His expression was unreadable. "You boys lost?" His voice was surprisingly soft. "Hungry," Dylan said. Boss nodded slowly. "I see that, but we got rules here." "Bad rules?" "Maybe, but they're the rules." Boss wiped his hands on his apron. "I don't want trouble in my place, so I'm asking you nice. Please leave." "We're asking nice too," Dylan said. "Please serve us lunch." The man in the John Deere cap stood up again. "Boss, you want me to handle this?" Boss held up a hand. "Sit down, Ray." "But I said sit." Ray sat, but his hands were balled into fists. Boss leaned on the counter. "Son, this isn't about what I want. This is about the law. The law's wrong. That may be, but it's still the law. And if I serve you, I lose my business. Maybe worse." James spoke for the first time. "We don't want trouble. We'll take it to go. You serve us out back, we eat in the car, nobody has to know." Boss looked at James with something that might have been respect. "That's reasonable." Dylan shook his head. "No." James turned. "Bob." "No. We're eating here, at the counter, like human beings." "That's not happening," Boss said, steel in his voice now. "Then we're not moving." What happened next, nobody expected. To understand why Dylan wouldn't compromise, you need to go back 3 days. Back to a church basement in Birmingham, where he'd played a benefit concert. Back to the young black girl, couldn't have been more than 12, who'd approached him after the show. She'd handed him a drawing. Crude, childlike, but the message was clear. A stick figure at a lunch counter, turned away. Below it, "I just wanted a sandwich." Dylan had kept that drawing in his jacket pocket. It was there now, folded against his chest. James had grown up in Jim Crow, Mississippi. He knew every survival rule. Rule 1, don't challenge the system in public. Rule 2, accept small compromises to avoid big violence. Rule 3, live to fight another day. But playing guitar with Dylan these past 6 months had changed something. Not made him reckless, but made him tired. Tired of eating in cars, tired of back doors, tired of being less than human. "Bob," James said quietly, "this isn't the fight. Not here. Not now." "Every place is the fight," Dylan said. "Every moment is now." Boss straightened. "I'm calling the sheriff." "Call him." Boss went to the phone, dialed, spoke quietly, hung up. 10 minutes, Dylan nodded. "We'll wait." And for 10 minutes, the diner was suspended in terrible silence. Ruth stood frozen. The customers didn't leave, but didn't eat either. Ray watched with hungry eyes. James sat perfectly still. Dylan stared at nothing, or maybe at everything. The only sound was the clock above the register, ticking toward whatever came next. 5 minutes into the silence, something unexpected happened. The kitchen door opened, and a black man emerged. Old, maybe 70, wearing cook's whites. His name was Samuel, and he'd worked at May's for 30 years. Cooked the food that white people ate while taking his own meals standing in the alley. Samuel looked at Boss. "I need to say something." Boss's jaw tightened. "Samuel, this isn't... I need to say it anyway." Samuel's hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. He walked to the counter. "I've cooked in this kitchen 30 years. Never asked for much. Never complained. Did my job, took my pay, went home." Nobody moved. "But I'm tired." Samuel's voice cracked. "Lord, I'm so tired. Tired of cooking food I can't eat sitting down. Tired of using the back door of a place I helped build. Tired of being invisible." "Samuel," Boss started. "I'm not finished." Samuel looked at James. "Son, I don't know you, but I know what you're doing, and I want you to know you're not alone." Then Samuel did something that made the entire diner gasp. He walked around the counter, pulled out the stool next to James, and sat down. "Samuel, you can't..." Boss's voice was thick. "I can, and I am." Samuel folded his hands on the counter. "If these boys are in trouble, I'm in trouble with them." Ruth had been standing frozen. Now she moved. Slowly, she walked to the coffee pot, poured 3 cups, set them in front of Dylan, James, and Samuel. "Ruth," Boss's voice cracked. She didn't look at him. "They look thirsty." Ray stood up. "This is wrong." "Against what?" The voice came from the corner booth. An old woman, had to be 80, stood up. "Against treating people like people?" "Mrs. Patterson," Ray started. "Don't you Mrs. Patterson me. I'm older than dirt, and I'll say what I please." She shuffled toward the counter. "My grandson died in Korea. Died next to black soldiers. You telling me they're good enough to die for this country, but not good enough to eat a sandwich?" She left, but her words hung in the air like smoke. The sheriff's car pulled up exactly 10 minutes later. Sheriff Tom Hendricks, 45 years old, badge shined, jaw set. He walked into the diner and immediately understood the situation. 2 men at the counter who shouldn't be there. An old black cook sitting with them. A waitress who'd served them coffee. "Boss," he said. "Ruth, Samuel." He looked at Dylan and James. "You boys want to tell me what's happening?" "We want lunch," Dylan said simply. "I can see that, but you can also see that sign on the door." "We saw it." "Then you know you're breaking the law." "Whose law?" "The state of Mississippi's law." "The state of Mississippi's law is wrong." "That's not for me to decide. My job is to enforce it." He looked at Samuel. "Samuel, you know better than this." Samuel met his eyes. "Maybe I'm tired of knowing better." Hendricks sighed, looked at Boss. "You want to press charges?" Boss's face was a landscape of conflict. If he pressed charges, he enforced the rules he'd been taught his whole life. If he didn't, he broke those rules in front of everyone. Boss started, then stopped. Ruth spoke. Boss, your father built this diner in 1935. You know what he told me once? Said he built it because he believed everybody deserved a good meal. Everybody. Didn't put conditions on it. That was different times, Boss said quietly. Was it? Or were they just the same times with different people being brave? Boss looked at the counter, at Dylan and James and Samuel, at Ruth holding the coffee pot, at the customers, some angry, some conflicted, some looking relieved that somebody was finally saying what they'd been too scared to say. He looked at Hendricks. I don't want to press charges. Boss, my diner, my decision. Hendricks nodded slowly. Then there's nothing for me to enforce. He looked at Dylan. But son, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We just want lunch, Dylan repeated. And Boss, with shaking hands, took off his apron, walked behind the counter, stood next to Ruth. What do you want to eat? Boss cooked the meal himself. Hamburgers, fries, coffee. Simple food, made complicated by everything it represented. Samuel stayed at the counter. Ruth refilled coffee. And slowly the tension shifted. Not all the way. Ray and two other men left, slamming the door. But others stayed. A young couple in the corner booth. An old farmer at the counter. They didn't speak to Dylan or James, but they didn't leave. When Boss slid the plates across the counter, Dylan pulled out his wallet. How much? Same as everybody else, $1.50 each. Dylan put $3 on the counter. Boss made change. The transaction was simple, mundane, ordinary. And that was exactly what made it extraordinary. They ate in silence. The hamburgers were good, maybe the best Dylan had tasted, though he knew that wasn't about the food. It was about what the food represented. Halfway through the meal, the young couple from the corner booth walked to the counter. The young man cleared his throat. We're sorry, he said quietly, for the sign, for everything. James looked at him. You didn't make the sign. No, but I didn't say anything about it either. That's almost as bad. The young man's girlfriend added, We're leaving Mississippi next month, moving to Chicago. She paused. After today, I'm glad we're leaving. They left money on their table and walked out. By the time Dylan and James finished eating, the diner was nearly empty. Boss leaned against the counter, looking exhausted. You got what you wanted, he said. Now what? Now we drive to our next show. That's it? Dylan stood. That's it. We're not trying to change the world. We're just trying to eat lunch. You did more than that. Maybe. Or maybe we just reminded people that changing the world starts with lunch. Dylan and James walked to the car. Behind them, the diner door opened. Ruth emerged with a paper bag. Sandwiches, for the road. She pressed it into James's hands. I'm sorry, for all the befores. James took the bag. You didn't have to. I know. That's why I wanted to. Through the window, they could see Boss at the counter, head in his hands. Samuel's hand on his shoulder. They drove in silence. Was it worth it? James finally asked. Dylan thought about the little girl's drawing, Samuel's hands, Ruth's coffee. Yeah, Samuel sat at that counter. Ruth served coffee. Boss cooked food. Nobody can unhappen that. James nodded. Story will get bigger. Good. Let people think about it when they see their own signs. Dylan laughed quietly. I'm just a guy who wanted lunch. But he knew it was more than that. 3 weeks later, a letter reached Dylan. It was from Ruth. Boss took down the sign 2 days after you left. Said he couldn't stomach it anymore. Samuel eats at the counter now. We lost customers but gained others. Some people said it was about time. Said they'd been waiting for someone to go first. Thank you for being hungry. Dylan kept that letter with the little girl's drawing. Years later, when people asked him about civil rights and protest songs, he'd think about that diner, about Boss's hands, about Samuel's courage, about Ruth's coffee. I didn't change anything, he'd say. I just showed up. Other people did the hard part. The story became local legend, though like all legends, it grew in the telling. Some versions had Dylan making speeches. Some had everyone applauding. The truth was simpler. 2 men walked in where they weren't welcome. They sat down. They ate lunch. And they proved that walls only stand until someone walks through them. Boss died in 1982. At his funeral, Samuel told the whole story, about a man who had the courage to question his beliefs. Ruth worked at Mays until it closed in 1993. Before they locked the doors, she took the old "whites only" sign and burned it. Should have done that 30 years earlier, she said. James Carter became a respected session musician. He told the diner story in interviews, always crediting Dylan's stubbornness and Samuel's courage. Dylan, when asked about it, gave his characteristic answer. "I was hungry. We ate. That's all." But people who knew him saw how he carried that day, how it informed his understanding that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as refusing to leave, as simple as sitting down. The civil rights movement had its grand moments, marches and speeches, but it also had its small moments, lunch counters, bus seats, moments when ordinary people insisted on their ordinary humanity. One August afternoon in 1963, two musicians walked into a diner and ordered lunch. Nobody expected what happened next, but maybe they should have, because change never announces itself. It just shows up hungry, sits down, and refuses to leave.